seconds, or every time I've got 1 megabyte of data, right? These are configurable, okay? So in our case, unless you guys can really click or load test heavily, I assume it will be every 60 seconds, okay? And that's all you need to set. And finally, that's S3, that's my bucket here. And I should see, that's the test I did earlier today. I should see my files showing up, right? Just trying to go back. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Okay, so we should see 1 file every minute with the data showing up. Okay? That's it. So it's time to test, right? Before we go into the demo and go crazy and any questions? Because you guys will get excited after and you will forget all the questions. Any question on Lambda, serverless, or anything? Yeah, you just want to test, right? Oh yes, please.
How does the error handling process of Lambda, do we get any kind of event if there is a timeout or not?
Okay, so the question is, how do you do error handling in Lambda? So Lambda, every time you create a Lambda function, a new log is created automatically in CloudWatch. So CloudWatch is the monitoring system for AWS, and there's a part in there called CloudWatch Logs, which is about logs, right? So that's an appropriate name, I suppose. And so anything that happens in the Lambda function will be logged in there. So when you see in the Lambda code, when you see print whatever, this is actually printing to the log, right? Not to the console, because there is no console. There's no server, right? So it all gets logged. So you can very easily inspect the logs and see what's happening there. You could do that visually. You could do that automatically. You can fetch the logs with the API and inspect them. And if there's a timeout, you would clearly see that in the logs. And in the CloudWatch metrics for the Lambda function, you can always see the timeouts as well. So you could have an alarm saying, if I have more than X timeouts, send an alert to whatever, right? And that alert could trigger something else. Could send an SMS, could send email, could send, maybe it could call another Lambda function, right? So there are a number of ways to do it, okay? Yes?
How can we handle automated tests?
Okay, so that's a really good question. Usually people complain about coding in the console, and then they say, yeah, and that way, obviously, I cannot test. It depends on the technology that you're using. If you're using Java, for example, there's an Eclipse plugin that is available, from us. Where you can execute your Lambda functions locally. You can do JUnit testing on it, and that works reasonably well. If you use Node.js, you can use something called the serverless framework. I'll mention it at the end, which also allows you to run your Lambda functions locally. So, and for Python, something else. So there's no single tool to do it. Right, and we don't integrate that into Lambda, but there are many open source that are being built on top of Lambda to do that. Okay, but yeah, it's a good question. The limitation here is, of course, you cannot have a local copy of DynamoDB and a local copy of S3 and a local copy of RDS on your PC. That would be super nice, but it's not possible. So you can do mockups, or you can have a testing environment within AWS, which is probably the best way to do it. Like you would have, your dev and test and QA and prod environments for instances. You can do the same thing for Lambda, right? You can create different stages for API, etc. So I guess you can build your environments that way. But yeah, probably we need more tools. I agree. More questions? Yes.
Can we trigger the Lambda function from outside for example, other services? Not AWS.
Oh, okay. So one obvious way is to use an API, right?
Yeah.
A public API that triggers a function, like I'm doing.
I am mentioning like it can be a listener for like a WebSocket.
I think you can do. I'm a little late there, but on my reading, but I think you can do WebSockets now. You can do things like that.
Okay,
but from the external world, probably APIs are just the best way. The more secure, etc. Because you can, if it's coming from the outside world, you want to make sure you have authorization, you have a token, you have something, and you can do that in the API gateway.
Do you have any plans to increase the code deployment package size limits?
Yes, so the problem here is a Lambda function has a maximum size. Do you remember the size? I think I forgot.
50 megabytes as a zip file.
50
megabytes as a zip file.
That much? Okay, I thought it was less than that. Are you sure? Okay. So that's obviously if you're going to do, let's say, Python, that sounds huge. But if you, let's say, if you use Java and you want to embed your own libraries in the jar file, in the zip file that you're uploading, it could be a problem. So I'm not sure about that. But you can always ask. You can always ask, and if there's a strong case to do it, fine. But I think the philosophy of Lambda is to keep it pretty short. There's an execution timeout of 5 minutes. So it's not, a Lambda function is not supposed to run for hours and hours. So it shouldn't be a huge thing. Okay. More questions?
Actually, I have a question.
All right. Are you allowed to ask questions? All right. Yes, you are.
I saw some open source projects to support CI/CD needs for Lambda functions. Its names should be Lambda CI/CD.
Yeah.
Is there another option that directly supported by?
Yeah, literally every week on GitHub, there's a new project to do that. The initial one was called JAWS, which stands for Just AWS Without Servers. That's a glorious name. They renamed it to serverless. I'm going to give you the reference later. There's another one called Apex. There's another one called Gordon. If you follow Hacker News, literally every week you're going to see a new project. So my advice is, try them out and let us know how they work. I wish I had the time to try them all, but write, blog about them and tweet about them and maybe contribute to them, because definitely, yes, we need more tools. So it's moving really fast.
Thanks.
Hello. Can you reuse some variables between different Lambda executions?
No. So Lambda functions are completely stateless. Okay, so from one execution to the next, there's no state. That's why they're called pure functions. There is no state. So if you need state, it needs to be outside of Lambda, and typically you would put that in DynamoDB. If you had some session information or whatever, you would store it in DynamoDB. But you can't store anything locally in a Lambda function.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Oh, there's one down there.
Can we chain those Lambda functions? One Lambda function
Yes.
logically selects some other Lambda
Yes.
functions to run again?
So absolutely. So inside the Lambda function, you can use the AWS SDK, and part of that is invoking other functions. So yeah, definitely you could chain functions like that. Yes. which is, I think, good practice because you want to keep them really short. So you want to split your processing into multiple parts that are easier to deploy, easier to version, easier to manage, and chain them, sure. And you can have versions and aliases, etc. So, yeah.
Okay. While using Lambda, sometimes if you want to share the code between some teams, let's say, you also need the kind of configuration parameters there. So let's say if you use some credentials or if you use some different endpoints, but what's the best way to pass these configuration parameters to Lambda functions?
That's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, need to check. Right, but we can talk about that later. You know, my easy answer to that would be, sorry? No, that's my silly answer. So no copy paste. Again, you know, I would put that in DynamoDB, but it can become a chicken and egg problem. Okay, we can talk about that later. We can take a look. All right, demo. Okay. So I just need to. So I've got I have an EC2 instance running here, but it's just for just to host a small web app that is calling the API. Okay. So let me start it. Okay, it should be ready. Let me check. Yes, okay. So this is where you want to go. All right. Let's go. It's okay to do some scripting if you want. I mean, you can try and crash it. That's good. All right. So let's see if we okay, we see some traffic. Oh, you want the URL again? All right. Sorry. So usually this is going to crash the conference Wi-Fi. So I apologize in advance if that happens. Okay, everybody has it? Okay, so what are you doing here? Do you see the lolcats? Yes? You should. All right. So this is serving a lot of lolcats, right? I wish this was an AWS service, but it's not. It's called the CAT API. It's easy to find if you need a never-ending stream of lolcats. So when you're loading that page, you're calling my API, right, defining the API gateway, and you're passing that random data that is displayed on the page. It's just to create some volume here, okay? And then the data follows, you know, from API gateway to Lambda, writes to Kinesis, and then returns. So from a client point of view, this is a really fast call because the call returns before the data is even pushed to the database, which is good practice, right? So even if DynamoDB was shut down, this would still be very fast, okay? Because I'm just writing into Kinesis, right? You want another one? All right, this is really fast. Okay, and then it gets written into DynamoDB, and the Lambda function gets triggered, writes into Firehose, and every 60 seconds write to S3, right? So it should be 60 seconds now, so let's look at S3 here. All right, so yeah, so it's maybe a little small, but yeah, you can see the time here. Okay, so you see pretty much we have one file every minute, right? But if you were clicking quicker or reloading the page quicker, we would see 1 megabyte files deliver more often than once every 60 seconds. Okay, and do you want to look at one of those? The answer is yes. Ooh. That's a funny place to open the pop-up, yeah. So did I do something stupid or? All right. Okay. All right, you're still going. Good. But we have some scripts running, I can tell. So that's the more recent one, yeah. Okay, so JSON lovers, this one's for you. So what you see here, of course, it's not supposed to be processed by humans. It's supposed to be processed by MapReduce jobs written by non-humans, right? So what you see here is the result of the trigger. So you see the actual line that has been written into DynamoDB with all the fields, the timestamp, user ID, etc. So that's quite a lot. Okay. So yeah, you're not crashing, not crashing. Good. And so if we reload S3 again, we should see more files, right? They keep coming. So how many lines of code did we write? 15. Plus a couple of CLI calls. I'll give you that, but 15 lines of code. How many servers are we managing? How many servers, how many virtual machines are going to wake you up at night? 0, right? So that's cool. So something else will wake you up at night, right? Especially if you have kids. But that's a different problem, right? Different problem to manage. You can't shut them down, okay? So next question. So probably here we have, let's say 10 hits per second, or maybe 50 hits per second, right? If we had 1 million hits per second, what would change? What would you need to scale? Right, I'll show you the picture again. What would you need to scale if you had 1 million hits per second? Not much, huh?
All the servers, huh? All the servers.
Which one? All the servers, yeah. You would have to scale all the servers. Excellent point. So you would not need to scale anything, right? You would need to maybe add more shards to Kinesis to make it, more scalable. You probably would need to raise a few service limits. If you're using AWS, we have limits for many services, but they're here to protect you from doing silly things. And if you want to raise limits, raise the number of lambdas that can run in parallel, etc., you can just create a ticket and it gets changed really quick by AWS support. So a little bit of configuration, but no need to change the code and no need to change the infrastructure, right? If you have no traffic, how much would that cost? Lambda, 0. API gateway, maybe a fraction of something because you have an API defined. You would pay for a little bit, probably DynamoDB would be the more expensive if you have a lot of data already sitting in DynamoDB, but you would not pay for any extra data if you're not writing. S3, you would pay for storage, 3 cents per gigabyte per month. So that's not so much. So it's probably very cost effective too, right? So 15, 16 lines, no servers, very scalable, good performance, pretty cost effective, okay? So if you want to learn more about Lambda, one of my colleagues, maybe you've seen him, I know he's been in Istanbul a few times, Danilo, is writing a book currently on AWS Lambda, and the book is not complete yet, but you can buy it and get the new chapters as they become available. Actually, the chapter 7 became available this morning. So it's about halfway done. It's an excellent book written by one of the best experts on the subject. So if you can afford it, I would definitely recommend it. If you want to go further, of course, there's lots of documentation on Lambda on our website. There's a blog for compute technologies, including Lambda. We have a user group in Turkey, which I had the pleasure to attend a couple of months ago. It's on meetup.com, so if you're interested in AWS, strongly suggest that you join those guys. If you want to try and learn about AWS technology, there's a platform called Quick Labs to do online training. It's not free, but it's not very expensive, and they've just announced some new labs for Lambda. So if you want to try quickly without having an AWS account, it's a good way to learn. And the serverless framework that I mentioned, so it's not an AWS product, but I think they get support from us, and it's a very interesting way to do to extend the management of your Lambda functions. All right, that's the end of my talk. I want to thank you very much. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but I really, really thank you. Thank you to the conference for inviting me. It was a pleasure to be here. I'm definitely looking forward to the taxi ride back to the airport. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please remember to use the feedback wall just in the foyer, and we'll be expecting you back at 2:10.
Abi